Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be talking about the problems of GDPR compliance, and we're going to be looking at some of the ways in which we can help solve some of those problems through metadata-driven compliance. I'm delighted to be joined today by Simon Wright from Britecloud. My name's John Challis. I'm the founder and Chief Executive Officer of Concept Searching. I've spent most of my career grappling with the various problems in managing data, especially unstructured data. Simon, do you want to say a few words about yourself?
Sure, thanks, John. Good to be here. Kind of you to invite me. Yeah, my name is Simon Wright, and I'm the CEO of Britecloud. We're a software distributor that spends a lot of time working with the vendors that we distribute to create value out of the solutions by creating various solutions that solve challenges. Concept searching is a great example of a solution that we use an awful lot to help customers solve challenges with GDPR. My background is in software consulting and also working for independent software vendors as well. And as I said, very pleased to be here.
Okay, so what we're going to cover today, there's going to be an introduction to concept searching and also Britecloud. We'll be looking at the technology differentiators that makes the concept searching platform different from competitive products. And we'll be talking a lot about GDPR and how technology can help in some areas, not all areas, with compliance. But technology is certainly part of the solution to the GDPR challenges. There'll be a product demonstration where we show some of the features that we've been discussing. And we're going to run through 3 case studies that show how existing live customers have used the technology to implement responses within their organizations, and a summary of the benefits and takeaways. But first, a little bit about concept searching. We've been doing this now for 16 years, founded in 2002. And the application of metadata to structured and unstructured content is the key thing that we do. It's our main product, and we have a mature product offering in that space, as I'll show you a little later in the demonstration. We can connect to a wide range of sources. We've been recognized 9 consecutive years now by Knowledge KM World as being one of the companies that matter in knowledge management. And as it says at the bottom, we support a range of sources, including all versions of SharePoint. So what exactly is it we do? Well, we use our technology to analyze documents of any type by looking at the text within the documents and also all of the metadata associated with the document. We can figure out what that document is about, and we can tag it with appropriate metadata values that allow a number of other processes to then build on the understanding that we've created around the unstructured content. And in the diagram, we can see a number of applications. Search improvement is an obvious one, but also things like the identification of records so that you can implement records retention and other records management policies, obviously security, but a number of applications where metadata can be useful. So why do we need an automated solution? What's wrong with people tagging documents manually? Well, the answer is that it really just doesn't work. When you have a metadata structure arranged in a hierarchical taxonomy, sometimes containing hundreds or even thousands of potential tags that can be applied, it's simply just unrealistic to expect normal users of the system to be able to identify the appropriate tags for their own documents. Inconsistency is a huge problem. Two people will tend to tag documents very differently depending on their perspective of the document. And very few users will tag documents comprehensively, mentioning all of the major topics found in the document. The trouble with manual metadata application, though, isn't really its unreliability. It's the fact that bad metadata is really worse than no metadata at all. If you're going to end up with incomplete and in some cases incorrect tagging and certainly inconsistent tagging, then you might as well not bother, because the resulting metadata can't be relied upon for any purpose. So we used an automated approach to looking through documents to identify which tags are appropriate. And concept searching has a unique technology that it brings to bear here, which we call compound term processing. And this is our unique statistical technology that we developed back in 2002. And is the heart of our auto classification and search technology. And what it basically means is that we identify 2 and 3 and 4 word patterns automatically in documents that convey meaning, and we have a weighting algorithm that allows us to determine how much incremental value is contained in the higher order word entities. So using the statistical modeling, we're able to build a much more intelligent understanding of vocabulary than competitive techniques that are either based on linguistic analysis or even just keyword matching. At the heart of our product is our taxonomy manager, and this allows administrators to create the taxonomy structures that they wish to apply to their document collections. And the way the product is structured makes it ideal for subject matter experts to use. In other words, senior people within an organization who know what they're talking about in business terms. In contrast, it's not necessary to use IT people or information scientists to build taxonomies, because our integrated search engine and compound term processing make the building of rules a very efficient process for someone who knows the subject around which they're building terms. Much of the clue generation can be automated, because once we've scanned a user's collection of documents, we have that statistical model from which we can build an initial rule set completely automatically. One of the features we've added recently to the product is the ability to redact documents as part of a migration or other workflow activity. And we've done this in part in response to the need that we're seeing from customers in the GDPR environment. Sometimes it's necessary to send documents out of the organization, perhaps to individuals who've made GDPR information requests. But there might be certain information in those files that should be hidden before the document is sent out. And in the demo, in a few moments' time, I'll include redaction as one of the options we can perform as we process content. So, Simon, do you want to introduce us to the challenges of GDPR and explain some of the ways in which technology can to help us?
Sure, thanks, John. So GDPR is an interesting one. We've got a really nice slide here. I think this was originally from IBM. But this starts to give you an idea of the breadth of it. And it's a very broad and comprehensive regulation change, something that's been a long time in the coming. Really, to be perfectly honest, should have come a long time ago, given how fast technology has moved. At the underlying it is common sense, basically. A lot of common sense about how businesses should handle data subjects, which is the sort of GDPR term for people, citizens, but how they should handle their customer and employee data, especially stuff that has sensitive information in it. And so here are some rundowns of some of the basic scopes of the regulation. It's a very long document, as you can imagine. What interests me here is around the focus purely on the data subject. So data subjects really are at the center of the regulation. Data subjects are people that sit within the EU boundaries. So they could be an American citizen, it doesn't matter. If they're a customer of an organization and they're sat within the EU boundaries, then this regulation applies to them. Similarly, organizations that may be US-based, but have a customer base within the EU boundaries, this also applies to them. So it's very broad-reaching. It's interesting talking to different people from different parts of the world or different parts of the EU as to how they're approaching it, you'll find that you'll get a different response in Germany from the Netherlands, from Scandinavia, and so on. In terms of how concept searching can help with elements of GDPR, the list is quite long, but to highlight some of the areas, concept searching is very good at being able to find stored data within an organization. And John mentioned earlier about how concept searching can connect to multiple data sources. The idea that you can control data in the same way across multiple data sources gives you a really good chance of finding that stored data, which means you can also provide it when asked. And that's where we start to look at Article 15 onwards, and we'll come to that in a bit. Other advantages, of course, is you have control of your data. Then you can rectify issues with that data before it becomes an issue. So a good example is allowing concept searching to classify content, maybe as containing personally identifiable information or sensitive personally identifiable information, and then applying rules to it. I'm sure everyone on the call today has some experience with GDPR. You may be well down the road to compliance. You may be just starting today or in the last months or two. But what you probably are doing currently or have done in the past is to sit down and look at all the systems that you currently have and the data stored within it, how it gets there and who can access it, and how and when it gets used and how long you keep it for, and so on. And then also looking about how your current business processes and policies, how they match up with GDPR regulation. And as a result of that, you probably have a number of data handling processes that you've mapped out in sort of paper-based form, basically, Word documents and Excel and that kind of stuff. What concept searching allows you to do is apply those rules to live business data. So where something is containing PII and it's in a location or a data store in your organization where you've decided you don't want to hold that kind of data, this is where concept searching can help you action those rules in an automated way. And I suppose the whole point of this is to de-risk the organization from a GDPR perspective. Really, GDPR is around the risk management for organizations. It's about being perceived as a good organization in the eyes of customers and employees, but also minimizing the risk of data breaches, minimizing the risk of data that's sensitive nature not being controlled and leaking outside of the organization. Because all those things leave you open to some of the kind of fire and brimstone stories around regulatory fines and so on. Next slide, please, John. So Article 15 I mentioned just a minute ago. This seems to me to be an area of particular pain potentially for organizations, because I don't know about all of your organizations, but quite often they grow quite organically. IT systems can grow organically, and IT systems tend to be brought in quicker than things get retired or end of life. And so you may well find yourself in a position as an organization where you have some SharePoint environments, some legacy file shares, maybe some email archives on premise, or a number of different systems, legacy Lotus Notes installations and so on. Things that really should have been decommissioned or end of life, but just haven't got around to doing that. Article 15 brings all of that into sharp focus, because 15 onwards is all around the data subject. So here we have a simplified version of the regulation, but it's basically saying me as a citizen within the EU could ask any organization what data you have on me and why you have it, the category of personal info you have. The category is either PII, personally identifiable information, or sensitive PII. And sensitive means things like it may have my marital status or my ethnic origin, or things that may be damaging to get out into the outside world if there was a data breach, more damaging than, say, my postcode or a credit card number. The point that's the most painful, I think, for organizations that have all of those legacy systems is that you have to be able to provide any data on that data subject within 30 days of them asking for it. Now, that's all well and good. It doesn't matter how good your intentions. Unless you can find it and provide it, then you'll be in breach of the regulation. And so that's the challenges, I think. Some systems are very good at providing search functionality. SharePoint can be very good if it's implemented in such a way with good taxonomy and metadata and a well-configured search. File shares, for example, on the other hand, really challenging. So think about your organization and think about your systems that you currently have. How easy would it be for you to find a Simon Wright with this national insurance number and this postcode and this credit card number and this address across all of your storage systems, file systems, both structured and unstructured? Would that be something that you'd be able to do efficiently in under 30 days? And then think about the volumes of requests you may get as the regulation goes live, and start to think about what you would need to do in order to resource that. Next slide, please, John. So just looking at some of those pain points I mentioned, getting a unified view across all of your corporate systems is a real powerful concept. The idea that you could search for personally identifiable information for a particular data subject across a file share with the same kind of level of accuracy as in SharePoint and other systems is a really powerful prospect. It's the sort of thing that will allow you to respond to those subject access requests, Article 15 onwards, within that 30-day period. Then it's also about how can you control data across multiple systems with an even hand in the same way. That's about taking those well thought out policies that you've probably got in place already and putting in a system that almost automates those for you and makes them easy to implement. And of course, easy means they're likely to be adhered to by staff and people within your organization. So here's some questions that I think lots of organizations should be asking themselves as they approach May 25th. Next slide, please, John. So GDPR is an interesting one, and I'm sure all of you on the call have been reading and hearing about headlines about the potential for fines and so on. Some of the headlines have been quite just that, the headline-grabbing statements, but there's a reason why the GDPR has fines of the size that they are. No longer can organisations simply set aside a small chunk of profit and just say that's our risk management pot in case the ICO, which is the UK authority that will be enforcing GDPR come May 25th, it's just that we'll pay the fines to the ICO out of that chunk of money. When you start to get to 4% of global turnover, or 20 million euros, whichever is larger, that starts to become something that's very hard to mitigate at board level. But really more than that, what I'm interested in bringing up is what would happen to the organization's reputation should they be continually have data breaches, not report them within 72 hours, not let data subjects know that their data has been compromised. And that's something that happened to Yahoo. I'm sure some of you have heard the stories. Yahoo had a data breach December 2016. And under the GDPR, the way in which they handled it, they would have undoubtedly been handed out a fine. What interests me, though, about it is the reputational loss and the subsequent financial loss as a result of that was far higher than the 4% of global turnover, to be perfectly honest. So in December 16, first thing that happened was that their stock price fell by 5%, which is bigger than 4%. But more than that, at the point where Verizon eventually bought Yahoo, they knocked $350 million off the buy price as a result of that reputational loss and various other things. So all said and done, what happened to Yahoo, I think, was much more severe than than the 4% of global turnover potentially. And of course, if that had happened within the regulations of the GDPR, there would have been additional fines as well. So the reputational loss can have a huge impact to organizations, which is why it's very important to consider how you're going to approach it and address it. How are you approaching GDPR? As I mentioned earlier, depending on where you are in the world, people have a different approach. A lot of people are waiting to see what happens. A lot of people are trying to do the best that they can to get there in time. I think it's fair to say that not many organizations will. And I think the organizations that are going to enforce the regulations, like the ICO, are in a way comfortable with that because they appreciate it's a big shift. But of course, the whole point is that you need to be showing willingness to comply with the law, the regulation, which is why so many organizations are interested in hearing about technologies that can help support those excellent paper-based processes they're putting together now. Next slide, please, John. So there are lots of elements to think about in terms of GDPR and data. It's not just data sources, but it's the type of data too. Of course, concept searching can help a lot with some of the things on screen here, such as being able to crawl emails and find sensitive content within that, finding content in unstructured data sources, as John already mentioned, but also in structured data sources too. And so the ability to search and apply taxonomies across these different kinds of content gives you as an organization, if you're using concept searching, a very powerful tool to start to comply with those regulations. John, is there anything else you want to add to this slide?
No, I think by putting this sort of list together, though, what's obvious is that checking all of the sources within a large organization for personal information is a big challenge, and technology can't help with all of it. You know, for those paper records and some of the other things listed here, it can be quite tricky to see how they're going to be done. But of course, a lot of the information is in structured and unstructured content sources, and those are the ones that we technology can really come to the assistance.
Agreed.
Okay, so I'd like to do a short product demonstration now and just show concept searching in action, and try and bring out some of the points that we've been talking about so far. Concept searching can process a variety of sources. If I click the add button here, I'll just pull up the list of content sources that can be processed directly with concept searching. SharePoint, all versions of SharePoint from 2007 onwards can be processed, as well as, of course, SharePoint Online. We have support for websites, file folders, SQL databases, including Oracle and Postgres. And through the SQL interface, we can index things like Documentum, Hummingbird, and Worksite. And you can see a number of other sources in here, including email. And with CMIS, we can connect through a standardized interface to a wide variety of additional sources, including things like FileNet, for example. But for today's demonstration, I've indexed some file system sources and also some SharePoint sources. And what I'm going to do in a moment is I'm going to look inside this workflow documents folder, where I've got a couple of dozen typical Office documents, PDFs, and so on. And I'm going to be looking for PII, personally identifiable information. And this document here, the CC-Doc2, is the one that I'm most interested in. If we have a little look at the text inside that document, you can see that we've got some text in the document, and intermingled with that text, we've got some numbers that look like they could be Visa credit card numbers. And they're not specifically identified as such in the text, although this one here does say card number followed by the number. But this is the type of information that we're looking for that could potentially indicate a stored, in this case, Visa credit card number. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to classify all of those documents in that folder location using my workflow taxonomy. And in particular, I'm looking for PII, that's personally identifiable information, things like credit card numbers, social security numbers, home addresses, that sort of thing. And then those documents that get tagged as being about PII will trigger my workflow PII demo. And this is where we can perform an action on a document immediately following the classification decision. And the sort of actions we can apply include things like migrating a document from one source to another, changing its content type in SharePoint, increasing or reducing its accessibility, or even just sending an email to an administrator to alert them to some content that we found. The PII demo workflow is triggered on the classification of PII and causes a migration to SharePoint. So I'm combining my sensitive information detection with a migration demonstration where we're going to push the document from the file system into SharePoint Online and specifically into the PII documents folder. And one of the optional things that I've configured on the workflow is a redaction model that will remove anything located using either regex or NLP processing. So before I run the demo, let's just take a look in the PII documents folder in Office 365. And what we can see is at the start of the demo, that location is completely empty. So what I'm going to do now is just select the source I've been talking about, click Reclassify, and all of the documents in that location will be queued for reprocessing, and 2 of them should trigger the migration workflow, and see what the action does to those migrated documents. Just while we're waiting for that, I'll just go back to the documents folder a moment and mention a couple of other things. Concept searching does a lot of processing on the documents, not only metadata generation to populate, to manage metadata properties in SharePoint, for example. Here we can see an IPSV and an enterprise column that have been populated by concept searching. But even within the SharePoint interface, an end user can access the UI here and access some advanced functionalities, such as being able to view the classifications that have been assigned to a document. And bear in mind, this is any SharePoint end user working with their own documents or documents they have access to can gain access to those menus. We can see how the document's been classified. And if we have a question about why this particular document was tagged, say with United Nations, then we can click the little plus sign here, and it'll show us what evidence was found in the document to cause it to be classified, and also what classification score it achieved. And here we can see its references to UNICEF and the World Health Organization that have caused it to be tagged as about the United Nations. If I other of the advanced features, you can see that we've got a duplicate analysis. When concept searching processes documents, we look for duplicates and also near duplicate documents. And in this case, you can see that concept searching has identified 3 documents that are actually all smaller than this source document, so they're not identical. They're only 98% identical. They're very, very similar to these documents, but they're smaller versions. So in terms of duplicate elimination, analyzing versions, perhaps reducing some of the garbage before running a migration, concept searching provides a lot of analysis of the content, not just metadata generation. So let's go back to our PII document location and see if those documents have started to arrive. And here they are, the 2 documents that I expected. The CCDoc2 document has been migrated. You can see over on the right-hand side that the credit card numbers that were found in that document, we've chosen to actually pull those out of the document and push them into SharePoint string properties, just so the administrator can quickly see which documents contained credit card numbers and indeed what those values were. But if we go and look at the document itself in the SharePoint preview, and I'll just blow that up a little bit so we can see a little bit closer, you can see that those numbers that I showed you in the document originally have now been redacted. The actual pattern found by the regular expression locating those numbers has been used to identify the string, and as part of the migration, so the original document is not being modified. But the migrated copy of the document can have sensitive information removed from it, optionally during the workflow. So that's a summary of the demonstration I wanted to show you today. It's highlighted some core capabilities, the ability to build taxonomies and apply metadata, the option to trigger a workflow to do something with that document, and where it's appropriate, certain information can be removed during that migration process. So what I'll do now is just switch back to the PowerPoint presentation. We've got just 2 or 3 more slides to run through for you. Just get that round the right way. Oh, it's shot to the end for some reason. Okay, so what I wanted to do now was just run through a number of real customer stories where some of this technology has been used, not specifically for GDPR, all three of these customers are actually been our customers for long enough that GDPR wasn't really even on the menu of considerations for why they deployed this technology. But in each of the three cases, it's interesting to see how the same technology that can assist with GDPR has actually been around for a long time and is a well-proven, concept searching is a well-proven solution to delivering this type of technology, even to the largest of clients. The first one I want to look at is this one, which is a not-for-profit organization operating in a highly regulated industry. And this customer communicated with their customers and stakeholders primarily through their website, which was constantly being updated. But they needed to add metadata to the content on the website so that users could select by subject or type of document using some kind of hierarchical selection mechanism. And they also needed to implement records management so that records could be found and controlled and updated in a compliant manner. With concept searching, they were able to automate the tagging of all of their documents, and as a result, they significantly improved the communication via their website, and also their ability to comply with and respond to the ever-changing regulatory environment in which they are forced to operate. The second example I want to talk about is a large US military agency who's been a customer of ours for a very long time. And they originally chose our technology because they identified that manual tagging really was a problem and wasn't going to be a solution for them, and they were seeking an automated alternative. They were very concerned about data privacy and data loss prevention. And as a result, they set up concept searching to scan not only their intranet environments, but also a number of public internet sites that they were contributing to or that they were concerned about monitoring. And they constantly monitor these sources, looking for PII, things like home addresses, credit card numbers, but also things like medical test results that you definitely wouldn't want leaking outside of the appropriate domain. And most of their content is actually quarantined, that is checked by concept searching prior to publishing. But since they don't control all of the publishing processes, some of the content has to be checked after appearing on the site. But this can be done very quickly. And as a result of implementing this technology, I'm pleased to be able to let you know that this agency has suffered no data breaches in the past 11 years. And the third one I want to talk about is a global manufacturing stroke technology company. And they had a lot of different systems, and one of their goals was to reduce the number of on-premises servers that they operated and to significantly move their data online. They had a lot of data silos, a lot of disconnected data, and looking for things across their various environments was a major challenge, shall we say, with many different systems needing to be checked independently. So their goal was to migrate this content to Office 365. Concept searching classified the source documents and controlled the migration process topic by topic, transferring around 20 million documents to SharePoint Online in less than 2 weeks, which gives you some idea of the scalability of the product. All of the content was checked and classified during the migration process. And now, with the new SharePoint implementation, it's possible for them to search and maintain content using largely that single system, as opposed to the many disparate systems that they had in place previously. So as we can see, technology such as concept searchings can be a major contribution to GDPR compliance. By understanding your content, locating your content, and tagging your content, it makes it much easier to find information perhaps related to, for example, an individual's personal data request for information. It makes it easier to locate that content, to control it perhaps with the records management system, to control the release of PII. And as we saw with the demonstration, it even provides the option to redact content, removing sensitive information from copies of the data, should that be important as part of the process. So I guess what we'd encourage you to do is to think about some of the topics that we talked about in today's webcast. Please get in touch. There's a lot of information on the Concept Searching website, but please also feel free to get in touch using the contact names that I'll give you in a moment, either here at Concept Searching or at Britecloud. And we look forward to talking with you to see how our solutions can assist in your environment. Our next webinar is coming up on the 2nd of May and looks at how metadata can assist with cleanup of files before migration and then lead to a more successful migration project. So that's our next webinar, May the 2nd. But for today, I'd like to say thank you on behalf of myself, John Challis, and also Simon for joining us. I think we've got just a couple of minutes spare at the end of the webinar. I don't know if there were any questions that came in during the course. Simon, had you been monitoring that?
Yes, I have actually. Thanks, John. There were a few questions that were submitted when people registered, and there's a few others come through while we've been on, which is great. First question was, well, I'm not sure it's really a question, but I'm trying to update myself on the potential which concept searching has to contribute solutions for GDPR compliance. So I'm hoping we've answered that in some way, shape or form. I'm very happy to talk to you about that, if not one-on-one after the session. What we have done at Britecloud working with concept searching is to take concept searching as a tool to underpin those kind of governance rules that apply to GDPR and create a solution to help you respond to subject access requests and also to control those potential data issues that come up that are outside of the scope of your current policies. And so, but that's something, as John has just talked through with some of the examples, is very common with commonly done with concept searching. So very happy to talk to you after the session if there's more that you'd like to cover. Another question here, John, was do you have template for policies and procedures? I guess probably what that is asking is about the taxonomies. PII taxonomies, yes, we have those available. They won't fit your organization exactly. As John said earlier, what's quite nice about concept searching is the ability to point it at a data corpus, a set of your content, and start to pull back what concept searching sees as the meaning behind it. Comparing that with your taxonomy and refining your taxonomy means it becomes a taxonomy specific to your organization. So that's certainly something we could talk to you about, John. I'm sure you'd be very happy to do that.
I think possibly part of that question, Simon, might be about workflow templates using something like, say, Nintex to automate some GDPR processes. Do you have any thoughts to share on that? True. Yep. In the subject access request solution that I talked about just a minute ago, we've actually taken your concept searching workflow engine and, as you know, John, extended it so that it doesn't do the migration or those other things. It actually kicks off an Nintex workflow as part of that process, which means you can then map out your data handling process very clearly using Nintex. Still making all that good use of concept searching to move the content to a secure location and act on it. But yeah, you certainly can extend the platform to integrate with other systems, and then many of your customers have done that, John. So yes, that's a good point. There was another question that came in during the session. Does the product come with predefined GDPR templates to allow multi-language PII, SPI detection and classification? Well, as I said, we have taxonomies that relate to PII. You'd want to tune them to your organization. John, do you want to talk just very briefly about multilingual? Because I know concept searching handles that quite well. Yes, indeed. Of course, we've been using English language for today's demonstration, but I'm delighted to tell you that everything that we've demonstrated to you today works with Unicode. So you can build taxonomy structures, metadata structures, and classify Japanese, Chinese, Russian language documents, whatever you want. And the statistical modeling that I spoke about works with any language in the Roman alphabet. We can automatically identify the language of a document, and we support, I think it's well over 100 languages for that.
Great. Another question.
I think we've got time for one more question, and then we'll draw a close.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, there's another that came in during the session, which was, am I the end user providing the compound term processing terms? I think what people are getting at is around, am I the person defining the taxonomy? Do you think that's what that means, John? Am I missing the point there?
If the question is, does a human have to create the taxonomy structure? The answer is yes. There are tools out there that claim to be able to build taxonomies automatically from a corpus of documents, but I personally don't think they work. So in our view, yes, the taxonomy structure itself has to be built by humans. But compound term processing can be used to generate the first set of rules for the auto classification, and that's a completely automated statistical modeling based upon an analysis of the customer's own documents. So that part is completely automatic.
And I suppose the nice point there, John, is that you can refine and refine and refine as much as you want to, right? So when you have a taxonomy, you reapply it, look at how that's been applied to the corpus and see if there's other terms you need to bring in. So it's quite an intuitive process.
Yeah, absolutely, I'd agree. And we have a number of other webcasts that go through Taxonomy Manager in detail and show you exactly how you can use that tool to quickly generate classification rules and then tune for accuracy. But I think we're out of time, so I'd like to thank everybody for attending today's webinar. I'd like to particularly thank Simon for joining me and providing very useful and interesting insights around GDPR. And I'd like to see you all on the next webcast in May. Thank you and goodbye.